Twitter carousel continues to spin. I would say uncontrollably, but it's not. It's we're at the end.
Yeah, but this one is shocking.
Yeah, the news today is that Ben Johnson is not leaving Detroit.
Yeah.
Many thought he would be the new coach of the Washington Commanders or maybe even the Seattle Seahawks.
It sounded like, there's only two jobs left, and that's in Seattle and in Washington, and that the only thing that anyone was waiting on was Ben Johnson and Mike McDonald, the offensive coordinator in Detroit and the defensive coordinator in Baltimore. And that was always the thing, is it's those two will take whatever, those two jobs. And it was rumored McDonald more likely to Seattle and Johnson to Washington. And lo and behold, we found out today that Ben Johnson told him no, that he's staying. One, I'm sure Detroit gave him a butt ton of money, which I've never fully understood why more teams don't do that. There's no salary cap on coaches, right? And the NFL owners print money. I think the Ford family's doing fine. I've never understood why, when you got a guy like Ben Johnson, and maybe there are guys that don't necessarily need to feel like they have to be the head coach right away, or that Dan Campbell, by all accounts, is a great guy to work for. I'm sure Ben gets a lot of autonomy as being the OC, has to take none of the blame whatsoever, right? It all falls on Dan Campbell. I never said, why not go throw $7 million at an offensive coordinator and be like, hey, Ben, what does 7 do? And you don't have to deal with any of the crap that a head coach does. You just sit there and run your offense. And I don't know exactly the details, but I guarantee that comes with a raise. And maybe Ben Johnson just didn't like the situation in Seattle or Washington, or thought that next year Detroit should be good again, at least from an offensive standpoint. Everyone comes back, basically. And maybe he thought next year there would be, better job openings. I mean, what if Andy Reid steps down next year?
Well, that's where I was going with my conspiracy theory.
Oh, I like this.
Yeah. I know you love a good conspiracy theory.
I love a good conspiracy theory.
What if Ben Johnson knows that Andy Reid is leaving, a la the Nick Saban kerfuffle in college?
Should they share an agent?
Well, I was, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just looking at that because Andy Reid has had the same agent for years. His name is Bob Lamonte.
Yeah.
And he lives in, or maybe it's Lamont, I don't know how to pronounce it, but he's in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And I'm looking through a list of his clients. I do not see Ben Johnson, but it also doesn't have, this list has just major clients, not
well, and
coordinators.
Ben Johnson only recently, he's 37. He just recently came on the scene as
No, but seriously, what if Andy Reid is stepping down? I mean, that stuff's been out there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely some talk about it.
And the Chiefs are, through agents or however they do it, they're getting the word out to Ben, hey, sit tight. We kind of want to pair you with Patrick Mahomes. And we'll pay you really good money to do it. So why don't you just not take that Washington job? How about that?
Well, it's always a risky thing, because the idea is that when you're a coordinator, you struck while the iron's hot, or any coach for that matter, right? It's like you never know when your name goes from, the top of the list down to mud. But you would think with Ben Johnson, again, very young, 37, and your O-line comes back, Goff comes back. The only one on your offense, Laporta comes back. I think the only one that really, Josh Reynolds will leave. So you got to replace your second best receiver, but hopefully by then Jameson Williams steps up and can be that guy. So both backs come back. There's no reason this Detroit offense should take a step back. And if you do that, if you're Ben Johnson, you should be fine. You should be, again, the top candidate next year. And I don't know what jobs will be open next year, but you're right that if Kansas City is one of them, and you're the hot name, is there a better job in all of football than running the offense with Pat Mahomes?
No, exactly. And think about, how often do coordinators, the hot name coordinator, how often does he go back to? I mean, that's weird.
It doesn't.
It was a weird move.
Yeah. The only one that I can remember is McDaniels did this when he took the job in Indy.
Yeah, I guess so.
And he came back, and the idea was supposedly is that he was the coach in waiting in New England, and they gave him a bunch of money. But that's Jim Irsay too. I don't want to work for Jim Irsay either. And maybe the Seattle one, I could see the Jody Allen thing being a problem with that with Burt Cole. Washington, everyone seems to speak highly of the Harris thing. The Seattle one, I can see. The Seattle one, no offense to Seattle, because
you can see what?
Let's say I'm Ben Johnson, right? And I got my pick. Let's say I've got my pick of Washington, Seattle, or I go back to Detroit, right? Detroit's going to give me a bunch of money, and I'm young. I feel like I'm going to be fine. If I'm looking at Washington, I'm going to get to pick my quarterback. I got the second pick in the draft. So it's not going to be Caleb Williams, but you're going to get Drake May or Bo Nix or whoever you want, right? So I'm going to have a big say in that. I don't know. I haven't heard anything negative about the new ownership group or Josh Harris in Washington. It seems to be a fairly attractive situation. Most people in the NFL circles are saying that is a good job.
Yeah.
But that maybe is an unknown because it's a new owner and you don't have a quarterback. I'm saying in Seattle, I can see someone like Ben Johnson looking at this and saying, I got Geno Smith. I don't know when my next quarterback is going to come, right? And I got Jody Allen and Burt Cole. I mean, we just had Pete Carroll say that the reason he's not coming back is because people that don't make football decisions are making this decision. I'm saying in Seattle, I can see where Ben Johnson looks at that and says, nah, I'm good.
Well, he didn't interview, did he? I thought he was supposed to.
He was going to. I don't know that he ever did.
He was supposed to today, I thought. Or maybe it was
one
McDonald.
of the commenters on our YouTube link says that actually DC or Washington brass flew all the way out to Detroit for him to tell him no thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they flew to Baltimore to see Mike McDonald, too. Isn't it interesting, too, that they also had Dan Quinn, but Dan Quinn flew to D.C. to meet with them?
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
By the way, Ben Johnson and Andy Reid do not share an agent. Ben Johnson's agent is a man named Richmond Flowers, who is the only agent to have played and coached in the NFL.
Oh, really?
He also reps Mike McDaniel, Brandon Staley, Nathaniel Hackett, Robert Saleh, and Ejiro Evero.
Okay. Okay.
Well, I mean, that's...
Did he go to school with Bob Lamonti?
Don't know that.
Did McVay fart on him at any given time?
Well,
He was on that commander's staff, actually. This guy was. This Richmond Flowers, he worked on the coaching staff, Kyle Shanahan's coaching staff in D.C. with McVay, with McDaniel, with all those dudes that have gone on, and with LaFleur, who've gone on to have head coaching
He was
jobs.
smart. He got into the money game.
Yeah.
The agent business.
Oh,
He coached alongside McDaniel, now reps him.
Well, I would imagine the Commanders are a little pissed here.
Yeah.
I would think.
Because they're now just them in Seattle sitting out there, and one of the key candidates that apparently they were waiting for is going back to Detroit. Now you just have Mike McDonald, right? The defensive coordinator of the Ravens, who's another young guy, but he's on the defensive side. And then you have Dan Quinn.
Yeah.
And not that there aren't other guys, but it seems like with the Seahawks, those are the two guys that they like. Dan Quinn could be the leftover guy who a team settles for.
Yeah. And he's a nice candidate, but you know.
Yeah, I guess.
Look, and maybe
do the Seahawks have to hire McDonald now? Like who else?
I mean, they don't have to, but it certainly seems like that is. It's either that or the one that you hear most in Seattle is Dan Quinn or McDonald. So
right, that's what I'm saying. Like, so if you don't think Dan Quinn's the guy, if they wanted Dan Quinn, they would have hired him.
You would think.
So they were waiting on McDonald and Johnson.
Yes.
Interviewed Quinn twice, but waiting on these two guys. Johnson pulls out. Now you're like, well, this McDonald guy better be good. And McDonald was there today, I think, in Seattle.
And maybe he wasn't going to get a look at either of these jobs anyways, but the OC down in Houston now, Bobby Slowick, has re-upped with them. He's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
He's staying in Houston.
Oh, okay.
So and there's another one, too. When you kick this ahead, so you have and maybe we'll find out exactly what happened with Ben Johnson, or maybe, again, it just is one of those where I didn't like either one of those jobs. But going into next year, realize that you could have the Buffalo Bills could be looking for a head coach. If they fall on their face again, McDermott could be out. The Giants, if Daboll falls on his face, could be out. Sirianni certainly is on the hot seat in Philadelphia. If Philadelphia flames out, that he's getting fired for certain. McCarthy in Dallas absolutely could be on the hot seat if he flames out. I think he's just got the 1 year left, and he said he's fine playing it out. And then, if Andy Reid retires. So there is, and then of course any
there's
team
always.
Well, and then there's every team that could just get fired. New Orleans could have a place open,
Chicago.
Yeah.
There's always like 8 openings.
Exactly. I'm just saying there could be some very, because if you take over the Bills, if you take over Philly, certainly would be on that. I mean, or Kansas City. I mean, some really high level quarterback play, and I'm assuming that Ben's a guy that knows this league is about one thing right now and one thing only, and that's having a quarterback. If you have a quarterback, you got 3/4 of the battle won. And maybe he didn't love the Commanders and what they were doing with their quarterback position in Seattle and Geno Smith.
Yeah, I was reading through his Wikipedia today, Ben Johnson.
Yeah,
just because I don't know anything about him. He said that his offense is inspired by Adam Gase, Darrell Bevell, and Mike Martz.
Ooh. Well, Mike Martz was very smart.
How do you feel about that?
I don't know if you might want to keep
that coming to your town.
You might want to keep that to yourself.
The old Adam Gase offense. Whatever happened to that guy?
Oh, I don't know. He's out there with his bug eyes somewhere, probably getting paid a bunch of money to not coach.